So I'm going to start now, but I'm very pleased to introduce none other than Tim Berners-Lee, of course, world-renowned as the founder for the World Wide Web. It is a joy to have you on the show because congratulations are in order. The Turing Award, you have won the most prestigious computer prize there is out there, the Nobel Prize for computing, no less, really.
It is an incredible honor. Yeah, really, in computing, this is the pinnacle. This is like the Nobel Prize. If this is the one for computing, this will be it. Yeah.
And in terms of where your work has been, of course, it was all about the founding, the inventing of the World Wide Web, but your work continues, of course, particularly when it comes to the privacy that is now involved, the talk of where we go in terms of transparency in the World Wide Web. You want a public good and basic right when it comes to the World Wide Web. How are you looking to achieve that?
Well, obviously when the thing started off and it was just a few people, then the web was looked at as a luxury. But then as the number of people using it, actually we looked at it and saw there was actually 20% of the people on the entire planet are actually using the web. Suddenly that gives you a switch and you realize that there's two pieces to it that really, first of all, if there's 20% of people using it, then what about the 80%? Don't we have a duty? So we started the World Wide Web Foundation, which is about bringing the other 80% on board. But also you look at the 20% and you realize it's not just our job as technologists to make it more powerful, although that is cool and we do that all the time. It's also, we also make sure that because it's so much of people's lives, because it's the way they do so many things, such intimate things in their private lives, things like medicine, going to the doctor for a second opinion, rather than and going to the web for the first opinion, because there's so many things that people do which are so crucial. We started to realize that it becomes, in fact, what people are now calling is a human right. So it's another human right, the right to communicate with whoever you want. So keeping the internet open and neutral is a really, really important part of that. Keeping it, fighting attempts to spy on people and to block, obviously censorship also is another problem.
I want to start off with the first element that you spoke about there, and that being the next 80% to bring on. How are you going about advocating that within the group with which you work? Because we have spoken to people who are putting up satellites into the earth. There's, of course, been Google looking at drones and balloons. This is something some of the tech titans have been analysing for a while. How would you like to see it fostered across the rest of the world?
Well, at that point, we realized that mobile was going to be the way it went, because most people couldn't afford, in developing countries, couldn't afford laptops. So, and in fact, it did take off. So then it was 20%. So now what's happened is that the number of people using the web it went through 40%. Now it's nearer 50%. So now we're talking about half the people in the world, and mostly it's been mobile. But then that's been because a huge amount of Africa has got cell towers. So you can go through sub-Saharan Africa. I have with a cell phone, and you get signal. You will be able to tweet more or less wherever you go. But that doesn't mean obviously it's very important now to get the price of devices down and the price of connection down. But then as we go through this point where half the people in the web in the world have, and then it becomes a majority thing. In a way, then there's another important thing to think about, and that is that these other people, the minority who are not connected, they become more and more disenfranchised because every business, every government will just kind of assume that you use the web, and facilities will start being provided only on the web, and then that'll be so that our duty to the last 20%, the last 10%, we foresee as being very, very different sort of nature.
I want to then strike upon the area of privacy, and in fact the data that we now put upon the internet is incredibly crucial to ourselves. You were talking about healthcare and the like. What then of the moves by certain corporations and indeed governments? Are you optimistic or pessimistic as it stands about the privacy and the ownership we have over our data?
I feel that our privacy, first of all, is really, really important. I think the world knows that. I think all this work with talking about privacy on the internet as being a human right has gotten to, I think, has sunk in. I think that the recent moves recently in the US to suggest that we should go to away from that are very mistaken. And if anybody tries to implement that, they will be met with huge pushback, and you will see people protesting in the streets and protesting in Congress. So I think basically privacy on the web is something which is a really well-established principle. Then you talked about my data. Then a more complicated thing is, okay, but what about the data that's all my clinical results in a hospital, for example? Well, in fact, we're moving in a really good direction there, in that particularly hospitals are required in a lot of countries to give me my data. I can go to the website, I can download it. Obviously, there's a question of whether, if I then end up in another hospital, whether I can upload it to them and whether they'll be able to use it is an interesting question. But I think we're starting to establish for things like medical fitness data and that sort of thing that this is about me, and in fact it's really important for me to be able to have that data and control who has access to it. And I think that what started with medical data is going to spread to all kinds of data, all financial data, all kinds of data about our lives. With the Internet of Things, gadgets in my house, I hope we move to a world where every time I buy a gadget, it actually works for me. It reports to me and it gives me the data about what's going on in my house.
We have, of course, just today, Mr. Berners-Lee, seen Donald Trump, the President of the United States, sign into law the fact on the unwinding that internet service providers need to ask us before selling on our web browsing history. That is something that seems to be a step backwards, perhaps, in your mind's eye?
I think it's a step in a very bad direction. I think it's a step in a disgusting direction, in fact. And I think it really suggests a lack of appreciation of the core values, which are core, the international values, the human values, they're core American values, they're core Republican values too. So it's a bizarre way to go. In fact, it is just a step, it's a sort of an indication of a direction. I understand, I'm not an expert on these things, but the people I talk to assure me that actually the FCC thing which was unwound was an FCC Obama era, it was a ruling which just pointed out that under the telecoms law, or that an ISP, like a telecommunication company, isn't allowed to violate the user's privacy. And so I think that if the FCC does want to change things, then it will have to go through, it'll have to go back and go through rulemakings, and there will have to be public hearings, and there will be public input, and I expect there will be a huge amount of public input.
Because some of the reaction to this, of course, was that the internet service providers, the likes of AT&T, perhaps were being unfairly treated when the internet juggernauts such as Google and Facebook, ruled overseen by the FTC, are allowed to use our data, perhaps without getting us completely to sign away the agreement to that. Do you think that some of the internet giants should have to go through more rigorous testing when it comes to use of our data, or is that the quid pro quo to having free services?
Yes, it is a good idea for the internet giants like the big social networks and the search engines to be subjected to serious constraints over user privacy and user data. That doesn't mean that they're the same as AT&T or Comcast. AT&T and Comcast, their job is to deliver the bits. They don't do content. They're not a society. They're not a club. When you join a social network, then you join a club. You sign the terms and conditions, and within that social network, then you get a certain carefully controlled, on a good day, or depending on the network you join, or less carefully controlled environment where you are allowed to do certain things and other people were allowed to do certain things to you, and the conversation can proceed with things like retweets or likes. And when you join a social net, then to a certain extent, it is like joining a club. You can join other clubs, and there are always other clubs. And of course, because the web is open, you can go and make your own club as well. So there's, to a certain extent, whereas what you do in a social network is your choice to be within that social network. Whereas when you connect over a telephone line, whether it's Wi-Fi or wired, then really that's like drinking water. That is just a utility. It's you have to go through whatever it is you've chosen, Comcast or AT&T or whatever, just because that's life involves, the way you communicate is like you breathe air, you communicate internet. So the internet really, spying at that level is a completely different thing, and is absolutely an appalling idea.
And so the looks towards perhaps net neutrality being unwound is a concern?
Clearly, I think that the previous FTC under Tom Wheeler did a good job by pointing out that the internet is a utility. When you look at the way people use it for all kinds of things, the way any business nowadays, whatever you're making, whether it's physical or abstract, the first thing you do is get a domain name and make a website. So it's whether it's intimate communications between you and a member of the family, or business communications with you and somebody in another company, those are all things which we always have to be able to have in secret. So
yeah.
I think that, and the fact that so net neutrality is about lack of discrimination. I don't want to find that I can't go to a particular website because my ISP has decided that actually no, they want me to buy my shoes at this particular website, so I can't. They'll slow down the packets to this website. Commercial bias, or perhaps worse, political bias. I can't go to this this set of ideas. I can't go to this course because for political reasons my ISP is biasing my traffic. So political bias or commercial bias on the web is just it's just a no. Net neutrality is no. The web must be a place without discrimination.
When you see the unfoldings of fake news, which is now so prominent in our discourse, is this something that you ever felt the World Wide Web would be in a state of at the moment? Is this something that you think is being reacted to in the right way?
Well, I have to say that 2016 really changed my attitude. So for 20 years, 25 years since the web started, I'd assumed that those of us who do things with the web and the internet just tend to make sure that the internet is a platform, an open platform, the web is another platform built on top of that. It should be solid, it should be neutral, and then if you give humanity a good, open, solid, non-discriminatory platform, then humanity will go ahead and do good things. And look, we kept it open, we got lots of innovation, and we got Wikipedia, and we got OpenStreetMap, and we got all kinds of great things. But then 2016, I think actually it's not sufficient to just leave it open and let people build whatever social networks they like and let whatever happens on the social networks happen. Because clearly the way you build different social networks ends up making them places which may be better, which may be easier to have more constructive conversation, or if you build another way, the social network, just the way that the retweets work, or the way the way you flag things, the way you relate to other people, you can make it somewhere where, in fact, nastiness ends up propagating through the network and being amplified more than niceness and constructiveness. So I think that now, no, we have to look at the social networks, and people who build the social networks have to look at them and think about the effect that they are having, the emergent effect that they are having on humanity.
Where does the World Wide Web go from here now with the rise of artificial intelligence? We are now using devices at home. You talked about, of course, Internet of Things. We're talking and using voice search now. Where do you think we can see the World Wide Web progress to?
I think that's in a way, I've always said that the next thing around the corner, it's really important that those of us who work on the current technology can't even imagine what's going to come. So to a certain extent, that's the case with artificial intelligence. I think there are some things which, like driverless cars, will be really valuable. The moment they become safer than people driving, then that will have a massive effect, and it may mean my driving to work becomes much less boring. Lots of clear benefits. I think, meanwhile, though, when that is one thing, is the AI doing a fairly menial job. So when the AI is replacing the labor, it's one thing. Yes, it's a huge thing. Yes, it will cause huge disruptions in marketplaces. It'll need a lot of retraining. people who did those manual jobs will need to find other jobs. But that's the sort of thing we've done before, and I think we can do again. There's another thing when the AI starts doing the jobs which make the decisions, when the AI starts to become a judge, when the AI, for example, when it's inside a social network and it's deciding what's a good news story for you to read, already it has a lot of power. It has the power of a news editor, and a news editor is somebody that you pick really well. Traditionally, when you subscribe to a newspaper, and you follow what they're doing, and you track the reasons for them selecting particular articles, and sometimes you have it out with them in the editorial columns and so on. So when that sort of thing starts being done by AIs, then a lot more interesting questions, more serious questions about what's happening to society and to what extent human beings are in control of it. And I think the questions that people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates are asking about what happens if the AIs get smarter than us, I think those are good questions to ask.
And questions I hope we can delve into with on another occasion as well. Tim Berners-Lee, it's been wonderful to have you. Congratulations once again on the winning of the Turing Prize. We wish you all the very best with your continued work on the World Wide Web. Thank you.
It's a massive honor. Thanks for having me.